Amen. Happy Sabbath.
Happy Sabbath, church. Our next and final presentation of today comes to us from another member of this church, and by the way, just so you know, all the doctors here are members here. The title of his presentation today is Let Food Be Thy Medicine by Dr. Ray Workman. Dr. Workman comes from North Carolina and practices at UAB Medical West. He has passion for preventive cardiology, especially diet and exercise. His research interest includes inflammation in coronary artery disease and regression of known plaques. Dr. Workman, we look forward to this. We thank you for your willingness to share with us today. And we ask that the Lord will bless you as you continue to bring us this final message of today.
Yes, thank you. And yes, I'm a member of the Adventist II Health Study ever since I was baptized in this church in 2005. But what I'm going to do today, I'm going to start and end with some patients that I saw this last week. And in between, I'm going to try to summarize what the other speakers have said, as well as give you some nuggets on what I do in my personal life and what I ask my patients to do. And if they do it, they can have life and they can have it more abundantly. But last week I walked in on my clinic day and Mr. and Mrs. D were in my office. And she jumped up out of her chair and says, "Dr. Workman, can I hug you? I want to thank you for giving me my husband back." Well, those of you that know me, I'm not a big public display of affection person. Over the years, the past 13 years in this church, I've been worn down. Evelyn Spencer, the first time I saw her, she says, "I'm a hugger." Pastor Carl Dorner. And so I would say instead of cringing, now I kind of almost enjoy it. But it's the same with my son. We had a father-son day earlier this year where he came in and he saw me do an arteriogram, and we had an echo and just different things planned. But one of our nurses in the cath lab, "Oh, I've heard so much about you, Christopher," and came up and gave him a big hug, and the exact same thing is... So it must be in my DNA, in the Workman German DNA, that hugging takes a while to get used to. But so Mrs. D and her husband, 14 months earlier, needed 2 rounds of revascularization. But the 10 years prior to that, he was if you go to the Brookwood Mall, he was the Santa Claus that you would wait in line and have pictures taken of with your children. But over the 10 years previously, his weight had crept up about 85 pounds. And as his weight went up, so did his blood pressure, so did his cholesterol. He developed insulin resistance, he developed diabetes, soon came sleep apnea, erectile dysfunction, and eventually he needed work done on his heart. We got that done safely, but as I do with all of my patients, I ask them to buy a copy of Dean Ornish's plan for reversing heart disease. And 5–10% of them will do it and follow the plan. And those of you that are not familiar with Dean Ornish, he's a very strict diet. He takes it's a vegan diet, and he actually limits the oils and the nuts. You exercise 60 minutes a day and things, but if you follow the plan, you see regression. And so Mr. D did this plan. He lost his weight, and as he lost his weight, we started taking him off his medications. First, the diabetes medicines went away. Then the blood pressure medicines went away. Interestingly, a lot of my patients, as they improve, the acid reflux medicines go away as well. We can talk about that at the end, maybe. But he is an avid exerciser now, and pretty soon, date night started coming back with his wife. She was able to move back in because of sleep apnea. She had moved out of the room. And now, one of my main points of today, why should we change our diet and lifestyle? Because you will feel better. Once again, I don't tell my patients, if you don't stop smoking in this, you're gonna die. I don't think fear works as well as feeling better when you make changes. And I think that's biblically based. Our Heavenly Father doesn't want us fearing Him. You know, He gives us, we have brains. We can figure things out ourselves. And so Mr. D and his wife, very, very thankful. They covered the plan. He is now on just a baby aspirin. No cholesterol-lowering medicines, no blood pressure medicines. He lost all the weight. Those are that's a success for me. And say, well, why aren't more people having success? And it's because of our diet. And I'll give you some statistics here in a little bit, but just a little point from personal things. So I think it's, well, what do you do, Dr. Workman? When I was growing up, we didn't eat a lot of sweets. We basically had desserts on the weekends. And so for 3 years in a row, I would save up my money doing chores. And when camp meeting would come along, I would go wild. I'd go to the book and Bible store, and I'd buy the ho-hos and the ding-dongs and the things. And I noticed that I got sick. And it happened 3 years in a row. I was never sick otherwise. And those of you that know me, I think at the hospital I've been at, 14 years, I haven't been sick a day. Once again, you don't want to brag about things, but people will notice, well, you're never sick. Why are you with things? And sugar, you know, it was mentioned a little bit earlier. What have we done over the past 100 years in America as far as sugar? 1900, the average sugar intake, 35 pounds. Now it's 150 pounds. Now for me, you know, since I wasn't used to a lot of sugar, I would imbibe it, I got sick, and it ruined my camp meeting. I couldn't go on the horseback rides and all the activities there, and I didn't like it. So I said, sugar's not for me. And those of you who know me now, I'm not a big sugar eater. I occasionally will have, you know, some oatmeal raisin cookies. At my birthday, I like to have a piece of carrot cake, but I'm not a big sugar eater. I did some research into it. When you have 24 teaspoons of sugar at a setting, you decrease the phagocytic activity of your white blood cells 90%. Yeah. And so it's well worked out. But so how did we get to the place that we are in America now, where we're number 37 on the list of mortality for countries? So sugar is certainly a big part. What about fat? So the average American male now has 101 grams of fat a day. For women, we're doing better, 65. But what does that come to over weight? 56 pounds of fat a year. Now, our American Heart Association diet will still tell us that the average American diet is about 40% fat. If you do the American Heart Association Step 1 diet, we want to have that down to 30%. So some of you, if you go to your cardiologist, will say, well, we want you to eat less red meat. We want you to take the skin off your chicken. And they actually still will say, we want you to eat a little more fish, even though the data that our first speaker was talking about with the mercury intake. If you follow our American Heart Association diet, you're going to take your fat intake from 40% to 30%. It's not enough to cause regression. The Dean Ornish plan, you know, you're taking your fat down to 5 to 10%. And if you do that, you see regression of disease. Patients start feeling better within weeks. Right? And so I'm going to keep mentioning Dean Ornish over and over again, as well as Neil Bernard. All of my patients that have diabetes, I ask them to buy Neil Bernard's plan for reversing diabetes. Why do I do that? Because it's effective. My own mother, 3 years ago, those of you that have met my mother, she's very thin. She weighed 105 pounds when she was married. 60 years later, she still weighs 105 pounds. So she's not overweight. She does like a little bit of sweets, but over the years, her doctor told her, well, I want to put you on metformin. So obviously that night I got a call. Raymond, I don't want to be put on a medicine. What can I do? So I sent her a copy of Neil Bernard's plan for reversing diabetes mellitus. What does it ask you to do? Exercise 30 minutes a day. It doesn't so much limit the carbohydrate intake, you're limiting the fat intake. You're decreasing the intramyocellular lipids, you're making your mitochondria works, and so our other doctor mentioned that earlier, and you're actually improving the way that your body responds to insulin. So 3 months later, hemoglobin A1C is 5.9. That tells us how well the blood sugar has been controlled the past 3 months. No metformin. My mother's happy. I'm happy. Yeah. So once again, why do we follow certain dietary advice? Well, once again, to be taken off medications and to feel better. Some of our doctors mentioned the China health, the China study. The biggest study done on nutrition and diet, followed, many people for many years. And those of you that haven't read it, you can buy it on Amazon for $15. It's a wonderful book, if you want to say, well, what about inflammation? What about following a plant-based diet for decreasing cancers, for decreasing heart disease? It's a wonderful. I'm not going to so much talk about that. The study I decided to speak about is called the InterHeart study. So, because it was a diverse, our church is very diverse, this study was very diverse. It took 30,000, not just Western Europeans, not just Africans, it had people of Arab descent. It's a very mixed group, and it followed them up. And I just wanted to read the final analysis. It says there are 9 modifiable risk factors, including smoking, dyslipidemia, high cholesterol, hypertension, diabetes, abdominal obesity, psychosocial factors, consumption of fruits and vegetables, alcohol use, and regular physical activity. Did we not just hear this? All 3 of our speakers were mentioning this new start. I want you to take out your pen, write down new start. It's those of you that have Ministry of Health, Ministry of Healing at home, it's page 127, 128, and say, well, what can I do to improve my health? There. But when we read through those, I'm thinking, that sounds a lot like these 8 natural laws of health to me. So if you follow them, will you feel better? Well, you can let me know. So, okay. A couple of other statistics, and one thing, since Young had mentioned the Adventist health study, remember one of the things that Dan Butner had said, there is not a grump among the whole group. Is that true of us? When we come to church, yes, you can follow a vegan diet, but if you sit there and you look like you just ate a lemon and you're frowning and things, I'm going to say you're not going to live 10 years longer. Young was talking to us about the interpersonal activities there and volunteering. I get very dismayed when I see patients come back after bypass surgery and they're depressed. So you follow patients like that and they don't do well. If they're going to go through the trouble of having revascularization, then you want them to do very well. And so just being a member of a church, having a dog, being involved, that's why we like cardiac rehabilitation. And that's why, I really encourage patients to do this Dean Ornish plan because it helps. It improves their lifestyle. They come back, they're happier, and they're healthier. So, okay. So a couple of statistics. The average cholesterol value in America today is 210. What is the average cholesterol for a vegetarian? It's 161. For a vegan, it's 133. So if you go to any heart doctors, we're going to be big on your LDL cholesterol. When I went through medical school, I was told that a 1% decrease in cholesterol equates to a 2% decrease in cardiac mortality. And over the years, our guidelines have kind of changed. When I first came to UAB, the guidelines were 100. Now most heart doctors will say 70. Eventually, they're going to be 50. Some of these newest trials that have made the Time magazine and newspapers, if you've heard of the Odyssey and Fournier, we have a new class of cholesterol-lowering medicines out. They're getting cholesterol LDLs down to 15. And in fact, in the Odyssey trial, if you had 2 levels of 15, you had to come out of the trial. They were worried about the LDL being too low. But so we have very powerful medicines now for getting that LDL down, but is there another way where you don't have to take medicines? I have to spend a lot of my time talking with patients, why are you not still taking the statin, the Lipitor, the Crestor that I put you on a year ago? If they're not going to follow a diet change in their diet, they want to say, oh, I want to just keep eating what I've been eating and give me a medicine. Lipitor doesn't make you feel better is part of the problem, and some patients it can make you feel a little bit worse. So if I follow nationwide, 100 patients that get put on a statin medicine after they have a heart attack, 12 months later, less than half are still taking that. Why is that? These medicines have been proven to stop, deaths from heart disease, hospitalizations, heart attacks, all the hard endpoints that we look at. Why do patients stop taking their statins? And it's not, some of it may be a little bit of muscle aches, so there's certainly a placebo effect, but I'm actually convinced that they're not feeling a whole lot better by taking it. And so if you're going to make changes, you want to feel better by doing things. Okay? And so this New Start program, we're going to spend most of the time on nutrition, but I don't want to leave off the others because the exercise is very important. I'm a member of the Birmingham Track Club, the Butts Society, which is the Birmingham Ultra Trail Society. These are people that run very, very long. They love to run 50Ks and 100Ks. I like the 5Ks, the 10Ks. The ones that run the long distance, unfortunately, tend to develop atrial fibrillation. So that's when they come to see me, and they don't like being treated with medicines, but diet. And once again, yes, it's not just the 30 minutes of moderate intensity exercise every day, which is our American Heart Association guideline. Yes, the Mayo Clinics come out with the HIIT, the high intensity interval training. Just doing a 10-minute, for 3 times a day gives you the benefit. I just want you to exercise. I'll give you a startling statistic. If our American Heart Association says we want you to do 30 minutes of moderate intensity exercise, how many Alabama women do that? 2%. 2%. And so exercise. So you have to make it a part of your life. You have to plan around it. And I have to smile even at myself. I do a spin class once a week at the Y that's by my hospital, and I'm driving around and I get mad because I have to park at the end of the parking lot and walk in. And you think, well, why are you here at the Y? You're here for exercise, and yet I want to park as close as I can to get in there. And you can go on the American Heart Association website, and they have tips. How can I incorporate more exercise into my lifestyle? For me, I'm a runner. I run 5-6 days a week. If it's raining very hard like it was this morning, I have treadmills and other things. Treadmill running is not so exciting. I tend to like to do other things. Tuesday nights, you can come join us. We have a Tuesday night trails that meets at Red Mountain Park. Different groups that run different levels. We'll run anywhere from 3 to 5 miles. But I want you to incorporate exercise. If you do it, will you feel better? Yes. Some of our people had some questions, and I want to try to answer. One of the fellows that asked about Diet Cokes. I tell my patients a regular Coke you cut out if you're drinking just 1 Coke a day. That's 10 pounds over a year. Now, the Diet Cokes, once again, we're not as fancy, we're not enamored with those either, because most of the Diet Cokes have aspartame, which is a neurotoxin, and there's a couple of hundred deaths in the U.S. every year from aspartame toxicity. I'll see patients that drink 12 Mountain Dews a day. I go, what are you doing? And so multiple studies have shown, that even the diet drinks, even if you're using Splenda, they kind of trick your brain into not feeling as full as you are. So the studies show that you actually eat more when you have a diet soda than when you don't. And our neurologists, it wasn't the highest powered study, but about 5 years ago, there's a trial that came out that says if you drink more than 2 or 3 diet sodas a day, your risk of having a stroke goes up by about 50%. You say, well, that's not a randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled trial. No, it wasn't, but it was enough that my partner got his attention and says, well, I'm not drinking any more sodas. Took me another year. We have sodas in our doctor's lounge. It wasn't so much that I didn't drink the caffeinated ones, but the decaf, I would get a Diet Sprite. About 2 years ago, I cut that out. To be honest, I can't say I feel better by cutting out the diet sodas, but so many people, when I go around and talk with our national nutritionists, they all say one of the first things you should do is get rid of the diet sodas. So personal things. Before I came to UAB, I was in Texas at the Texas Heart Institute. At that time, just in the one hospital, St. Luke's Hospital, they had 27 cath labs open and running all day, every day. Just to give you an idea, things are bigger in Texas. Yeah. And just 50 yards up the street, you have the Methodist Hospital, another big, national heart center. And so, but inside the Texas Heart Institute, there was a McDonald's. And I go, well, that's kind of not giving you the right idea. You know, you have people coming from all over the world to come to see, at that time, it was Michael DeBakey and Denton Cooley, very famous heart surgeons. But, and at that time, I got a little interested in cholesterol research. And in fact, I was a volunteer in a trial that Tony Gatto, Christy Ballantyne, Peter Jones, these are recognized, you know, national experts on cholesterol lowering. But they were looking at endothelium as the lining of your blood vessels. If you take a normal endothelium and you infuse a compound called acetylcholine, it should dilate up. If you have endothelial dysfunction from years of smoking, from years of high blood pressure, from high cholesterol, your arteries will constrict. And so they wanted me to eat a happy meal, and as I was young and healthy at the time, and they would look at the brachial artery reactivity. So my baseline, they infused acetylcholine, normal, things would dilate up. They gave me one fat-laden meal, and what happened to my brachial artery? Right down. So you think just one high fatty meal is enough to cause your arteries. And there's a correlation between what goes on in the brachial artery and what goes on in your heart. So you think of years after years of high fat. Yeah. And as I said, I gave you the statistics on fat. And so what can we do about lowering our sugar intake? Those of you that are interested, there was a Australian journalist that wrote a book. It's called That Sugar Book. Some of you may have heard about it. It made all the news. It basically says, I'm going to have 40 extra teaspoons of sugar a day for a couple of months and see what that does. So he had his cholesterol values, his weight, and liver function and everything. And it's amazing if you want to read about it. It just and it had to be sugar from healthful things. He had only granola bars, yogurt, things, and so he wasn't eating the ice creams and the cookies and the things. This was 40 extra teaspoons. He almost put his liver in failure, taking a healthy man. So I just want, you know, so that kind of rung home for me as I told you about sugar in my own lifestyle. Now, what about caffeine? Yeah, and for my patients, by the time I get down to caffeine, usually I'm talking about smoking and all these other things. By the time I get down to caffeine, what I actually tell my patients is I want you to have 200 milligrams a day or less. And I don't run into problems unless they're pregnant or unless they have mitral valve prolapse. But for me personally, I started drinking coffee when I was in medical school. So 12 years or so, I would drink 2 cups of coffee a day. And once again, how would my family handle this? Once again, how do you handle things for your loved ones? By giving me stern lectures and giving me books on what caffeine does and its incidence in heart disease and blood pressure and GI. No. What my mother did, she bought me a little thing of Maxwell House coffee. When I would come home to visit, I would have to slip away after Sabbath and go to the gas station and get a thing of coffee because I would have a headache. Yeah. And it's the same thing as leaving off. You know, when I finally stopped drinking coffee, I never have a headache. Well, I tease Sean Boonstra, I get a headache once a year. Yeah. But I feel better when I don't drink coffee. I have plenty of energy during the day. I get up at 4:30 every day and I go. And so once again, is there a little withdrawal? Yes, there is. But I like to tease Sean Boonstra because he used to drink 24 cups of coffee a day. Yeah, you know, well, that's an incredible amount. Yeah. And does he feel better when he stops? Yes, he does. Neil Bernard that I was telling you about, he no longer gets migraine headaches. Dean Ornish, when he cut out the dairy products, his asthma and his allergic rhinitis went away. He put it back in, they came back. So for him, these famous doctors are saying, hey, I'm feeling better by the changes that I'm making in my lifestyle. Because once again, if you change a few things and it doesn't make a difference, well, then you don't want to do it. Do I still enjoy? Once again, our Bible will tell us whatever we eat, whatever we drink, we do to the glory of God. And so last summer when I was at Lake Junaluska, North Carolina, we went whitewater rafting, and the kids, Uncle Ray, can we have some ice cream? Well, sure, we can have some ice cream. I don't do it all the time, but that's part of, you know, once again, you want to enjoy life. But once again, if you're having ice cream every day, probably not the best. A book I read this past year by John Robbins. You'll recognize the name from Baskin Robbins. He's wondering, why are my father and my brothers, down through the thing, all dying at age 55 of having heart attacks? Well, what is ice cream loaded with? It's loaded with fat. And so, but if you're interested in him, it's just called The Diet Revolution, or The New Diet Revolution. Talks about a vegan diet, why he decided, what happened to him, and he gets into some of the social issues as well that I'm not going to so much get into, as far as decreasing your green footprint and methane gas and things. So the World Health Organization this past year came out with a startling statement, because I often ask Dean Ornish, I said, well, why aren't you the Surgeon General? You've come out with this amazing research that says if you follow your plan, you can reverse heart disease. Why aren't more people doing it? Yeah. And he tried to get legislation through. I think he actually wanted to be the Surgeon General, but we have some powerful lobbyists. The Beef and Cattlemen's Association, the dairy industry, they're not interested in having, if you're going to cut on their bottom line, and so they lobbied against him, and other people were chosen. But you can't lobby so much against the World Health Organization. So I want to read this to you. 70% of all cancers can be prevented by saying these three things: staying physically active, not smoking, and most important, by following the report's #1 dietary recommendation, which is choose predominantly plant-based diets and a variety of vegetables, fruit, legumes, and minimally processed starchy staple foods. Do I need to read that to you again? 70% of all cancers can be prevented. And so when my son and I went to a soccer game this past year. We flew into Houston for a Manchester United match. But while we were waiting in the airport to come back, he was looking around. You can do some people watching while you're waiting for your airplane to come. And Christopher says, "Dad, what do you notice different about this group in this terminal and this group in this terminal?" The group that we were in was flying back to Birmingham. The group next to us was flying to Colorado. And it was kind of interesting to see the difference in weight and also the difference in what people were eating. Yeah. And once again, I'm not going to go too much into detail there, but enough that my son notices things and says, hey, there's a difference between this group of people and this group of people. Interestingly, this is a little side thing, is not so much on diet, but there was a young 2-year-old boy that was running up and down and just the kids the kids' parents were trying to catch up with him, and it was just racing all around. And I said, "Do you know what we did with you, Christopher?" I said, "We put a leash on you." And Chris, no, that's child abuse. You never did that. Well, with amazing smartphones and things, 5 minutes later, picture comes over from my wife, who had stayed back in Birmingham. She wasn't interested in soccer. And there's Christopher. It's actually called a harness, not a leash. But you have a 15-foot cord, and he can run around all he wants. And there's a smile on his face, and I says, listen. So once again, you can be physically active and yet not, that's just a little personal side note. So, a study was done by the University of Michigan recently, and they put out, what are the 5 most addictive foods here in the United States? And the actual thing that it said, what do you lose control over how much you eat? What do you find hard to limit? And what do you eat despite negative consequences? And, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out what the 5 things on the list. Number 5 was ice cream. Number 4 was cookies. Number 3 was chips. Number 2 surprised me. Actually, the chip, isn't that one of the, free, I guess it's Lay's potato, you can't just eat one. Isn't that their motto? But anyway, number 2 was chocolate. I would have guessed chocolate was number 1. But number 1 was cheese. And so those of you that, so I got some statistics for you. 100 years ago, what did the average American eat pounds of cheese a year? It was 3. What is it now? It's 35. See, so what am I telling you about what's happened to our fat intake? What am I telling you about what's happened to our sugar intake? And so that's why the two most recent studies that I looked at this past week, to get some statistics for you, 67% and 70% of Americans are overweight. Well, could our diet have a big part to do in that? Yes, it certainly could. And Young had mentioned the body mass index. Every one of you, when you go to your doctor, you're going to get this number. And so your smartphones will give it to you as well. A normal body mass index should be 19.5 to 25. The way we in the medical profession, diagnose or define overweightness as a BMI of 25 to 30. A BMI of 30 to 35 we call obese, and over 35 we call morbidly obese. Yeah. And so that's the kind of things that automatically show up on your chart when you go to see your doctors. So how are you doing with the 5 most addictive foods? I can guarantee you, I won't come to your house. I'm sure our pastor will not come to your house and rifle through your things and say, you're doing this and this. And no, once again, we're here to encourage you. I'm here to give you some information. What can you do to limit your risk of having heart problems? As I said, the World Health Organization just told us, that inner heart study, if I didn't give you the statistics there, if you followed those 9 modifiable risk factors, for men, it's a 94% decreased risk of having a heart attack. For women, it was 90. Just those things can change your risk that much. So, yeah. No. Okay. Let's see, there's a few other things. Oh, I called Neil Bernard this last week and I said, can I quote you on this? Do I have this right? And he says, yes, you have this right. So once again, this is the one that wrote the cheese book and the diabetes book. And in fact, I'll be seeing him next month. We're having a nutrition and dietary conference that they'd have once a year, where Dean Ornish and Kathy Furston and Dan Butler, and all these people are going to be there. But Neil Bernard, the beef industry has contributed to more deaths than all the wars of this past century, all natural disasters, and automobile accidents combined. If beef is your idea of real food for real people, you better live real close to a real hospital. So once again, I'm not getting, but you say, well, what can we do? And I actually memorized it. The World Health Organization came out with their definition of bacon. Listen to this. It is a salt-laden, fat-laden, carcinogen-causing substance completely devoid of nutritional value. Wow. Salt-laden, fat-laden, carcinogen-causing substance completely devoid of nutrition. And even some studies have shown that each slice of bacon that you eat takes 7 minutes off your life. Well, that's similar to smoking. The studies have shown each cigarette is 7, 8, 9 minutes, depending on the study. And I don't have to talk with you about, how many deaths there are from smoking. I looked it up this past week. 448,000 deaths this past year directly attributable to smoking. Over the past, anywhere from 440 to 480 over the past 3 years. So, this past year, President Trump declared a war on opioids because there were 65,000 deaths a year from opioids. For benzodiazepines, it's 9,000. But think of how that pales kind of in comparison to smoking. Do you know how much it costs to make a pack of cigarettes? Less than 10 cents. If you go to buy a pack of cigarettes, how much is it going to cost? $6? Maybe in New York, 10. I don't know what it is, but it's awfully expensive. But it costs them 10 cents. So where is all this money going? But I don't think I have to talk too much, since most of us are Adventists on smoking. What's my time up? I see him motioning to me. How are we doing? Okay. So what I'll do, I'll tell you another patient. As I told you, I'll tell you two. I walked in also this past week, and there was an 80-year-old lady that told me, Dr. Workman, you were wrong. Well, that's not the usual thing that you get when you walk into a patient's room. And this lady, 14 months earlier, She had a heart attack and needed bypass surgery by Dr. Davies at UAB. I saw her back and then again afterwards and said, well, I'd like you to really do the Dean Ornish lifestyle, lifestyle plan. She says, I'm moving, not moving, I live 6 months in California and 6 months here in Alabama. That's what she's been doing for a long time. One of her sons was a vice president in Kaiser in California. And I says, well, let me get things arranged. That's Dean Ornish country in California. Says, let's see if we can't get it arranged so that you can go through his lifestyle reversal program. She did it. And actually, I heard back 3 times over the previous 6 months from the doctor that she was seeing out there. She made me call you. Is it okay if we stop your medicines? The reason why she told me that I was wrong is I told her that in the long term, it was going to save her money. Well, she came back. She says, you were wrong. I had to buy a whole new outfit. I had to buy a whole new wardrobe. And this lady is buying the Birkin bags and the Jimmy Choo shoes. And so I'm sure it was very, very expensive for her. But once again, she followed the plan. And she's very feisty, a lady. She said, I wanted to be the fastest walker in the program. She can walk 15-minute miles now and can do 4 of them. I'm talking, she's 80 years old. What did she do earlier the day before she came in to see me? She was chopping wood. I haven't chopped wood, but she enjoys it. Pushes a lawnmower. And I go, well, that's just incredible. So you follow things, and as I said, over those previous 6 months, what had we done? The medications come away. She feels better. And she said, I can't wait to go to church and show people what I look like. Well, that might be a little bit of pride, involved in there, but I was proud of her. So the patients that follow the plans, they feel better. They do better. They have better outcomes. And so that's what I just want to encourage you on this new start. What can you do to incorporate better nutrition? What can you do to have better exercise? And they talked about water, statistics. Over 50% of Americans are dehydrated. Well, that makes sense if you're drinking a lot of sodas and things. So you say, well, Dr. Workman, what do you do? So I do drink a lot of water. And in fact, I can, one day a week, I go by a lakeshore on my way home, and I run. It's a 5-mile trek along Sanford there, and I can lose 5-6 pounds of water weight. I have to drink that all back. I drink 3 waters at a time there. But once again, our other doctors have said, you take your weight in pounds, you cut that in half, and that's the number of ounces that you should be drinking of water a day. And our other doctor said you should maybe even add a little bit to that. So once again, try it out. Do you feel better? What's the first thing that I tell? I have some patients that faint in my practice. We call it neurocardiogenic syncope, and we do table tests. What's the first thing when they start feeling lightheaded? We tell them to drink 2 glasses of water very rapidly. Yeah. And if that doesn't work, we have other fancy things. We have medications and compression hose and different, very rarely you have to do pacemakers with rate drop responses. But do the simple things first. Yeah. And just as a side thing, a lot of men develop prostate problems. And some of the medicines that we use for relaxing the prostate gland to get your urine out better cause a lot of dizziness when you stand up. And that's one of the things that I tell them. So if you're in church and you're standing up for the closing prayer, you have to stand up slower if you're taking the Proscars, and the Flomaxes and the Hytrins and things there. As I know, there's been quite a few men in our church here that have developed prostate cancer over the past years. So I have here the statistics here. 70% of the risk of prostate cancer for men who consume, a 70% increased risk of prostate cancer for men who consume a high amounts of dairy products. Well, this is one of Dean Ornish's other plans. He doesn't just look at heart disease, he also looks at prostate cancer. And he's done research on, the dairy increasing your insulin-like growth factor 1 and causing problems. And actually, when you take that away, you can actually alter your genetic intake. I'm not going to get into telomeres and things. Those of you that are fascinated with the science, you can read up on it. But once again, a change in your diet, can that decrease your risk of having prostate cancer? For those of you that have been diagnosed with it, you get kind of worried about it. You get changed. You go and have procedures done. And I see some men afterwards that have some problems. They have some leakiness of urine. They have other things. And they go, I wished I'd never had this done. Why not try to avoid it? So, yeah. Okay. William Castelli was the director of the Framingham Heart Study. Or some of you, most of you have at least heard of that. He used to say in all of his lectures, when people keep their cholesterol values less than 150, they are virtually assured of never suffering a heart attack. This is a major thing. So keeping your cholesterols down. And so once again, that's kind of a little bit of the error before we had our fancy statin medications and things. But once again, diet. You have a good diet, you exercise, you do that. Heart disease should be what's called a paper tiger, is what Caldwell Esselstyn calls it in his book. So, but I wanted to, as I took the title of my talk today from Hippocrates. Let food be thy medicine, and most of you can realize that doctors will take an oath, and part of our oath is to first do no harm. But I've pulled up some famous quotes from Hippocrates, and the first one's for young Lau and Carmen. He actually says, the best medicine is walking. That's a famous quote from Hippocrates. I was talking with them, and I know they love to go out walking in the countryside, and so I just wanted to commend them on that. Yeah, it's a wonderful example. You have doctors that are not just telling you things; they're doing it, and things. So, but a few other quotes here. As I think Hippocrates lived 400 years before Christ. He was a Greek physician. He was the father of medicine. I just want to read a few things because you could almost, if I told you that Ellen White said this, you might believe me. Illnesses do not come on us out of the blue. They are developed from small daily sins against nature. When enough sins have accumulated, illness will suddenly appear. The greatest medicine of all is teaching people how not to need it. If someone wishes for good health, one must first ask oneself if he is ready to do away with the reasons for his illness. Only then is it possible to help him. This is for our GI doctor, all disease starts in the gut. Say, well, this is a little side thing. We had a clinical researcher come down from the Cleveland Clinic this past year and gave our cardiology grand rounds. And the name of his talk was Carnitine, Choline, Phosphatidylcholine increases TMAO values. And once again, that's a big thing. But carnitine, that's in our energy drinks. I'm not a big fan of our energy drinks. And another thing for the man that asked about sodas, when you look at your soda, phosphoric acid is one of the top ingredients. Causes the endothelial dysfunction that I was telling you about. But anyway, choline, phosphatidylcholine, more from meat. So what we eat, can that change this microbiome that he was talking about, the bacteria content that all of us have? And can it make it so that your gut becomes a little bit more able to have things come through, raise up inflammation and cause heart disease? An active area in research, and this guy's saying, yes, it is, and he's looking at inflammation. I'm not going to bore you with all the details, but that's just amazing, once again, what we eat, not just the fat content and things here. Now it's, once again, the meat is the big thing. So all diseases start in the gut, 400 years before Christ. Maybe I'll give you one more, and then we'll end up. If we could give every individual the right amount of nourishment and exercise, not too little, not too much, we would have found the safest way to health. You like that? I liked it. I liked it. So, but I'll end up. Most of us in medicine, we get a lot of what I call throwaway journals. There's a couple journals we get that we read and we take notice of, but every day we get one or two. We kind of look at it, oh, okay, and toss it. And one of those I consider the Birmingham Medical News. All doctors here will get it, and then nurses and things. But the only reason why I didn't throw it in the trash right off the bat is because the first thing it says something about UAB. Well, UAB is always building, so I'm not going to get into that. But on the front page, it says, the Stricklands advocate a plant-based diet. Well, I knew I was talking this weekend, so that kind of perked up my attention. So I said, well, who are these Stricklands? So I'm not going to read you the whole thing, but I'm just going to share you here. So this is says, while most of us understand the benefits of eating vegetables, we may not be aware of some of the scientific evidence that supports it. Montgomery physician Brian Strickland and his wife Carolyn have embraced the vegetarian lifestyle. Their conversion began with the China study, we've mentioned that a few times today, which examined the relationship between the consumption of animal products, including dairy and chronic illnesses such as coronary heart disease, diabetes, breast cancer, prostate cancer, and bowel cancer. The authors of the study concluded that people who eat a predominantly whole food plant-based diet, avoiding animal products as the main source of nutrition, including beef, pork, poultry, fish, eggs, cheese, and milk, and reducing their intake of processed foods and refined carbohydrates will escape or reduce or reverse the developments of numerous diseases. I'm going to read you the whole thing, just one more paragraph. So, about 10 years ago, I read the China study, which is the largest study on nutrition and health, Carolyn Strickland said. It was a well-done study that looked at how nutrition impacted human health, most specifically cancer, over a 27-year period. Then my husband and I watched the movie Forks Over Knives. We had that, this was 6 years ago. We showed that here in this church, which also looked at the impact of food on our health. That's when we decided to change our eating habits. So here you have a physician in Montgomery. He reads the China study, says, maybe what I'm doing isn't the best. And then he reads Forks Over Knives, or watches that. Honey, what do you think about doing this? And started making some changes. I felt that this study was scientifically solid enough that we should act on what we saw and make change in our lives. Didn't need me telling him, to incorporate things. Doctor said there was enough evidence in this one study to prove to me that I didn't need to look for nutritional supplements to keep me healthy. I mean, it just goes on and on. But this month's issue of Birmingham Medical News talking the same thing that we're proposing to you here today. I have to share one other thing. So this is one of the nurses that works in my cath lab. So all of my patients are real, the examples I gave you today. So we'll just call her Mrs. E. So Mrs. E, I have two lipid profiles here. One is dated 9/14/2017. The other is dated 10/10/2017. I'm just going to give you two numbers. Total cholesterol 290, LDL 209. We use as a definition in cardiology 190. So if you're over 190, then we're telling you that you have familial hypercholesterolemia, and it kind of takes you down one road. But anyway, so total cholesterol 290, LDL 209. And the other one, a little note that she wrote here to me saying, I'm so excited. My cholesterol dropped 84 points in less than 1 month, dropped 68 points LDL, and then she's talking about her risk. The Framingham study had a total cholesterol to HDL. I'm not going to get into that today. But anyway, what did she do to have a big drop in her cholesterol of that much in 1 month? The same things. Exact same things. Adopting a plant-based diet will have that big of an impact that fast. In the Dean Ornish studies, a couple of weeks, he took patients that had severe 3-vessel disease, couldn't walk across the street without using nitroglycerin. A couple of weeks, things had changed. Do they feel better? Once again, I'm going to keep reiterating it. Why do we make changes in our diet? Not so that we can live 10 years longer, but because we're going to live more abundantly. And one of our first ones was talking about the frontal lobe. We could get into the science of what all of these things do to your frontal lobe, including alcohol and smoking, and dare I say, television, bypassing your frontal lobe. What would the devil love, if we can't reason and have the Holy Spirit talk to us through our frontal lobes? But anyway, I'll end up there, because I spend a lot of my time, on dealing with coronary artery disease, and advising people on how to make changes in their lifestyle. And so sometimes it works. Other ones will say, no, doc, just give me my stent and give me my Lipitor and medicines and send me on my way until I see you again next year. Not all of them, but unfortunately, that's what we'll see. So I think that there's a better way. So Romans 12 will tell us, I beseech you therefore, brethren, by the mercies of Christ, that we present our bodies a what? A living sacrifice, wholly acceptable to God, which is our reasonable service. So are we doing the best? The Bible will also tell us that, we're a temple and the Holy Spirit dwells within us. Well, how are we doing as far as diet? Some of us might be in a time of trouble before the time of trouble because of our health. Any questions? Yes.
I'm waiting for the mic.
Okay. So we're a little over, so I see it's 12:30, so.
Mic check. Okay. I have two questions, Doc. My first question is, what is coronary heart disease? Okay. What are its symptoms? What are its cure? My second question is probably more relevant to Dr. Collins, who spoke earlier, and you alluded to it, saying that all diseases started in the gut.
So the first one, coronary artery disease, the arteries that feed the heart, or we call them coronary arteries, or the heart coronary. And so because of our diet and lifestyle, most Americans are going to build up blockages and eventually die from heart disease. It's the number one killer. I can give you statistics and things, but for many years, it's been the number one killer of both men and women. So I actually tell my patients, because of our diet and lifestyle at age 55, and for women at 65, the majority of them are going to have blockages. It's just, well, how significant are they? Even earlier, if you take men that are killed in wars, even in their 30s, they already had mild fatty streaks. So the more of these 9 risk factors that you have, the earlier in life you start building up blockages. So it doesn't, if you smoke and you have high blood pressure and high cholesterol, that just kind of accelerates that buildup. So that's what we call coronary artery disease. And then your second question was talking about gut there. Once again, I'm not the best one, but we have the advice that Young had given us, that Ellen White tells us to eat a bigger breakfast, eat less of a lunch, eat dinner, don't eat between meals. And once again, chew your food very well. The longer we take with a meal, probably the better, instead of gulping it down real fast. And some of us, if we follow her advice, once again, Ministry of Healing was written in 1905. And as Young and I can tell you, it's kind of amazing to see how science will kind of agree with it. As they do more and more studies, oh yeah, that's right. Oh yeah, that's right. Well, we don't have to wait for science to show randomized trials showing it. We already have the blessings already. But once again, so follow the advice. You can buy counsels on diets and foods and see what advice she's given there as well. But once again, the kingdom of heaven is not eating and drinking. So once again, we're doing this to have a better life. This is not salvational issues. And so I don't want you saying, well, look at me. I got the victory over eating ice cream. No, everybody's at a different level of their diet. And so once again, we want to encourage people. Well, what can you do? Maybe if you're having some arthritis pains. I've been mentioning Neil Bernard, has a wonderful book, Foods That Fight Pain. What's he going to talk about? He's going to talk about a plant-based diet. I'll ruin it for you. But the same thing. So once again, can major changes in our diet prevent the heart disease and the strokes and the diabetes and all the things that we've been talking about? Yes, and it's been well proven. So it's not hypothesis anymore. So, yes. Yeah, the question is, what about tofu? What about some of the vegetarian meats? I do eat some of them. I'm not a big fan of tofu. The only place I eat tofu in town is at Sur and West. They make a good tofu and broccoli. They spice it up a little bit. It's kind of good. But I do eat some of the vegetarian meats. Some of the griller, the Morningstar grillers and things, and I actually have my whole cath lab eating those, and they like it. And so, but once in a while, another little interesting tidbit, it takes 21 days to reform all of your taste buds. So the first thing, it takes a little while to get used to something, but you actually do. Yeah, and so think of, I'm not a milk drinker anymore, but if I went from 3% milk to skim milk, oh, that's watery, that's just awful. But after a couple of weeks, you go back to the 3%. Wow, is that rich and creamy? Whoa, it's making me. So once again, 21 days you reform your taste buds. I didn't even get into salt, and things here today as well. But so yes, I do eat some of those, and yes, every food you buy has the ingredients on there. I suggest you look that over. And the things that have the hydrogenated or the partially hydrogenated, probably not the best for you. The average American has 7 pounds of that a year. And so it's amazing, how much we get. But once again, you decide what works for you. And so I'm not going to say this is what I want you to do, but you can read up what some people have said. This is the change I made in my diet. This is the improvements I noted. And say yes, well, that'll work for me, or no, I don't like that. So. Yes.
I do want to testify to the fact that a vegan diet can promote quality life abundantly. I have an 86-year-old mother who has been a vegan for over 15 years, and she doesn't take a lick of medicine, and she lives a life abundantly. However, I know a few people in our personal family circle that no matter what plant diet they have been on, their cholesterol levels have never been affected. What do you do in that situation?
Their cholesterol values have what?
Never been affected.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
what do you do in that situation?
Then they may actually have a genetic, thing. And so once again, diet can do a certain amount. But no, if you have a familial hypercholesterolemia, I saw a man 2 months ago that had a cholesterol value of 1,200. Wow. Yeah. And so he could eat a completely vegan diet, and once again, that'll get that down to 900? Well, he's still at an incredibly high risk for building up blockages long term. Young may have patients that have, as children, have LDL values of 1,500, and they have to go LDL apheresis. So you can throw the statins at them, you can throw the new PCSK9 inhibitors. You're not going to get them down anywhere near 100 or 200. You're going to have to do further things. Because if you follow those patients that have the very high cholesterol, yes, they're going to build up other blockages. Yeah. So then you want to see a lipid specialist and say, well, is there something that I'm eating that can change? Because once again, yes, we got some data on nuts and avocados and things, and I eat those. Yeah. But once again, yes, they are high in fat. You have to be cautious, as I see a lot of Adventists that are overweight. And that if Young told us that 50% of Adventists are vegetarian, well, some of us are kind of imbibing a little more than we should. And so you have to watch what you eat as well. So even a lot of heart studies, people ask me, what about the Mediterranean diet? What about the Lyon heart study and things? And once again, yes, it's lower. Butter fat, 60% saturated fat. The olive oil down to about 15. So it's better, but if you want to reverse your heart disease completely, as I said, you have to get your fat down to that 5 to 10% range to really see the regression. Now, if you don't already have heart disease, then you liberalize that. Maybe you'll want to read Dean Ornish's book called The Spectrum. And he talks about different diet plans for where you are in your life. Not everybody has to have their fat down to 5 to 10%. No. But if you have established heart disease to see regression, you do. So, yes. Well, all of my nutrition friends actually say canola oil is the best, but olive oil is certainly better than the other ones. And studies have shown that when you when patients follow that, yes,